The mystery of the Kebra Nagast. What if one of the greatest mysteries connected to the Bible was hidden, not in Jerusalem, but in Ethiopia? What if an ancient Ethiopian text claimed that the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred object that represented God's presence among the Israelites, was taken from Jerusalem and brought to Africa? And here's the question that makes this story even more fascinating. How did the Ark supposedly leave Jerusalem? The answer takes us back to one of the most famous women in the Bible, the Queen of Sheba. But before we continue, there's something important to understand. The story you're about to hear comes from the Kebra Nagast, an Ethiopian traditional text. It is not part of the Bible, and some of its most famous claims cannot be independently established as historical fact. Still, its story is extraordinary. The name Kebra Nagast means the glory of kings. And at the heart of this ancient Ethiopian tradition is a story about King Solomon, the Queen of Sheba, their son Menelik, and the Ark of the Covenant. So let's go back to the beginning. According to the Bible, King Solomon was famous for his extraordinary wisdom. People traveled great distances just to hear him speak. And one of those visitors was a powerful queen from the south, the Queen of Sheba. The Bible tells us that she came to Jerusalem after hearing about Solomon's wisdom and reputation. She brought gifts. She asked him difficult questions, and after seeing Solomon's wisdom, his kingdom, and the worship taking place in Jerusalem, she was amazed. But here's where the Ethiopian tradition takes the story in a completely different direction. The Kebra Nagast identifies the Queen of Sheba as Makeda. And according to the tradition, her encounter with Solomon eventually resulted in a son named Menelik. Now pause for a second. Think about that. If Solomon really had a son connected to Ethiopia, could that explain why Ethiopian tradition later connected its royal lineage to the great king of Israel? According to the Kebra Nagast, it does. Menelik eventually travels to Jerusalem to meet Solomon, and this is where the story takes a dramatic turn. According to the Kebra Nagast, Menelik eventually leaves Jerusalem and returns toward Ethiopia. But he supposedly doesn't leave alone. The story says that the Ark of the Covenant goes with him. Yes, the Ark. The same Ark described in the Bible as the sacred chest associated with God's covenant with Israel. But wait, how could something this important simply leave Jerusalem? And why would the Ark end up in Ethiopia? This is where the Kebra Nagast gives its own explanation. According to the tradition, the Ark was taken from Jerusalem and eventually brought to Ethiopia, and this claim became deeply connected with Ethiopian religious tradition. But here's the intelligent question. If the Ark really left Jerusalem, why doesn't the Bible clearly tell us that this happened? That's where we have to separate tradition from Scripture. The Bible tells us about the Ark. It tells us about Solomon. It tells us about the Queen of Sheba. But it does not tell us that the Queen of Sheba had a son named Menelik with Solomon. And it does not say that Menelik carried the Ark to Ethiopia. Those details come from the Kebra Nagast and Ethiopian tradition. So why did this tradition become so important? Because the Ark wasn't just an ordinary object. For ancient Israel, it represented the covenant between God and his people. It was associated with the tabernacle and later the temple. So claiming that the Ark had been brought to Ethiopia was an enormous claim. It wasn't simply saying, "We have an ancient artifact." It was connecting Ethiopia's religious history directly to the story of Israel. And that raises another fascinating question. Was the Kebra Nagast simply telling a religious legend? Or was it preserving an older Ethiopian tradition about the country's connection to biblical history? We can't simply answer that with certainty, but we can say this. The Kebra Nagast became enormously important in Ethiopian tradition and helped explain the legendary origins of Ethiopia's royal dynasty. And then we reach the part that still fascinates people today. Where is the Ark of the Covenant now? Ethiopian tradition says it is in Axum, at the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. The object is guarded, and ordinary people are not allowed to examine it. That means we have a remarkable situation. There is an ancient biblical object whose current location has never been conclusively established. There is an Ethiopian tradition claiming that the Ark was brought to Ethiopia. And there is a sacred tradition in Axum surrounding an object believed to be the Ark. But does that prove the Ark is actually there? No. And this distinction matters. A tradition can be historically important without being scientifically proven. So perhaps the bigger mystery isn't simply, is the Ark in Ethiopia? Maybe the better question is, why has this particular story survived for centuries? Why did generations of Ethiopians preserve the story of Solomon, Makeda, Menelik, and the Ark? Why did the story become so closely connected with Ethiopian identity and monarchy? And why does the mystery continue to capture people's imagination today? The Kebra Nagast doesn't just tell a story about an ancient object. It tells a story about identity, faith, kingship, and the connection between Ethiopia and the biblical world. And maybe that's why it remains so fascinating. Because when you look at the Kebra Nagast, you're not simply reading an old book. You're stepping into a world where biblical history, Ethiopian tradition, royal legend, and religious belief all come together. And one question remains hanging over the entire story. What really happened to the Ark of the Covenant? Was it destroyed? Was it hidden? Was it taken somewhere we don't know about? Or could Ethiopia's ancient tradition contain a piece of the story that history has never been able to prove? We may never know for certain. But one thing is clear. The Kebra Nagast turned the mystery of the Ark into one of Ethiopia's most powerful traditions. And centuries later, people are still asking the same question. Could the Ark of the Covenant really be in Ethiopia? Let me know what you think in the comment section.